Chapter 5. The next day, Lizzie never showed up to hang out with us, which had us all a little worried at first. It could have been her just being embarrassed over what she had told us, or afraid that we wouldn't be able to move past it and onto other subjects. It may have even been that she just didn't feel the drive to leave her room, which happened from time to time. After what we had learned yesterday, however, there's only one thing on the three of our minds. "They hurt her again, damn it," Tony interjected, with what we were all thinking in the middle of a conversation that meant nothing. "We don't know that," I stated, but not believing a single word that had just come forth from my mouth. Dill sat there for a moment, just mulling it over in his head. Both Tony and myself watched him intently, waiting to see what he was thinking. "I think it's possible," Dill answered back to us, "and I'm worried." "Me too, man," Tony agreed, while placing his hand gently on Dill's left shoulder. "Me too." "To be honest," I added, "I'm a bit worried myself." I continued as if I had had a change of heart. "Do either of you happen to know where she lives, so we can check on her?" Dill asked. Both Tony and I shook our heads. Though we had all been friends for a while, she kept her address and even her neighborhood a secret from us. Defeated looks spread across our threesome before Dill had his aha moment. "Let's go, guys," Dill implored us as he rose to his feet. "Where are we going?" I asked while following his lead. "Police," he answered. "If we give them her name, they should be able to access her address." "Yeah, but," I began my retort, "they aren't just going to give us her address just because we tell them she is our friend. They would expect us to have that kind of information, being friends and all." The disappointment of the truth hit Dill very hard. "She also doesn't have any social media or a phone number that she had ever given us," I continued on. "She says she wasn't allowed to have them." "And there are no results in my search," Tony stated, holding up his phone confirming what he'd said. "Then I guess we have to go to the police and tell them what's going on if we want to help her," Dill suggested. "She didn't want us to do that," I reminded them. "Yeah," Tony argued back, "but I'd rather her be a little upset with us than dead or something." Though I wanted to keep with her wishes, I also couldn't argue Tony's logic, at least not in a viable way. So, off we went. Now keep in mind, at this time I'd still not done anything wrong. With this in mind, it's odd how uncomfortable I felt in the station. It felt like all eyes were on us from the moment we walked in the door. This may have been mostly because of Tony, who had had a couple of brushes with the law in the past. That didn't matter to me, though, as I walked suspiciously among the police. I was supposed to be there to ask for assistance. As we walked past each of the officers, I found my eyes moving from gun to face and back again. A man dropped some paperwork in the distance, and the sound startled me after all the buildup of anxiety. I took deep breaths and continued on with my friends, who seemed to be handling the situation much better than I was. Once we made our way to the desk of who looked like an executive assistant with a badge, it was oddly enough Tony who did most of the talking for us. "We have a missing friend," he spouted out to mine and Dill's surprise. "She was supposed to meet up with us, but hasn't shown up." "Have you tried calling her?" the lady behind the counter asked us. "She doesn't have a cell phone," Dill answered back quite quickly. "What about a house phone?" the lady continued her questions. "We don't know if she has one of those," I answered with a bit of jitter in my voice. "Does anyone still have one of those?" Dill asked with a little attitude added to his words. "I do," she answered him back with matching attitude. "Look, lady," Tony had begun to shout. "Our friend Lizzie lives in an abusive home with terrible people, and we think they may have really hurt her." Everyone in the vicinity had turned toward our conversation. Both Tony and the woman behind the counter have blood visibly rushing to their faces. "Look, kid," she began, holding back the anger you can see in her face. "We can't send a patrol car out to a house that may or may not have had a domestic disturbance based on the imagination of a couple of teens." "Listen, you bit..." Tony is cut off before he could get himself into trouble. Sure we can," a man called from somewhere behind the woman. He had on a cheap suit with dirty shoes and a crooked tie. "Hey, Phyllis," he called up to us and held out his hand. "I'm Detective Parham, and I would be happy to look into this for you." "Thank you, sir." I met his hand and shook it. "My name is Aaron, and this is Tony and Dill," I continued while pointing to each of them as I said their name. "Nice to meet you guys," Detective Parham began again. "Now, where does this friend of yours live?" he asked, to which we had no answer to give. "You see," Tony tried to find the words that made our friendship with Lizzie make sense, "she never actually told us where she lives. She was a bit embarrassed of her household." "That's okay," Detective Parham reassured us. "What is your friend's first and last name?" he asked. "Elizabeth Hale," I answered him before spelling out her name. Hayle. "Did you get that?" he asked the woman behind the counter. She didn't answer, but did begin typing without looking at us. After a few strokes and a second or two of the computer loading information, Detective Parham picked up a page that had just printed out behind her. "Lucky for us, she was pretty easy to find," he stated before stepping out from behind the counter. "There are only 2 Elizabeth Hales in the city, and I'm sure your friend isn't a 72-year-old retired widow." "No, she isn't," Dill answered back. "Good," Detective Parham started, leading us to the door. "I'm going to go check up on your friend, so you guys can just head home and wait to hear word from her, or me." "You don't have our numbers," Tony responded. "Oh yeah," Detective Parham pulled out his phone. "Let me get you guys on my phone." We each gave him our number, and off he went. He got into his car and took off, so the 3 of us just headed back to my house to wait on news. We all expected to hear the worst news possible at some point, but we, of course, had hoped we were wrong. It was about an hour later that we heard back from Detective Parham. We all stared at my phone for the first few rings, afraid to pick it up. Though fear had struck me, the need to know what was going on was far stronger. Hello? I spoke shakily into the phone. Hey, Aaron? Detective Parham's voice answered back. She seems to be okay. I let out a sigh of relief that caused my two friends to do the same. I got eyes on her, and she didn't seem to be hurt, the detective continued on. So you guys don't need to worry. He took a moment before continuing. I appreciated the concern you showed today. And I also have some concerns about that household. So if anything else happens, please let me know right away. Of course, I agreed. I'm glad to know we have you if we need you. Have a good day, Aaron. You too, Detective Parham. After hanging up, I let the other two know what he had said. Everyone was happy to know that he had our backs on the subject. I couldn't tell you how we spent the rest of that day. All I could say is that the relief we felt was far too short-lived. Thank you for listening. I release new chapters every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you prefer to read, I do release all 3 chapters every Sunday on my Wordpress. If you know anybody else who might be interested in this story, please feel free to share.